Hi everyone, Lisa Haven here, and I've got an urgent report to share with you. Now, we all know the election, all eyes have been focused on the election and rather intently. And while it is a very important topic that we need to keep a close eye on, the government is seizing the opportunity to go behind the backs of the American people and issue bulletins while all eyes are on the election. What are these bulletins? Well, first of all, I want to address the question, is there something that they know that we don't know that is on the horizon that they see forthcoming? Possibly. Number two, what do these bulletins have to do with what is going on with the election? Are they related? Well, I personally believe they are, but let me first show you the first one. The first one was a joint intelligence bulletin put out August 2016, so very recently, and it's titled U.S. Homegrown Violent Extremism, Focusing More on Civilian Targets. Now, this entire bulletin details how there is a 77% increase of homegrown violent extremist attacks and disruptions just within the past 12 months that have focused on civilian targets, and that they are actually increasingly favoring civilian targets. Homegrown terrorists, ISIS, ISIL, for example, are quoted in this particular document as attacking more civilian targets. Then they go on to list a few of the locations that they have specifically targeted, from local churches to places of worships to restaurants, nightclubs, concerts, public ceremonies, places of employment, classrooms, and so on and so forth. So lots of different areas are being targeted. But they also go in further detail some of the past behaviors associated with these particular persons. But they list a whole slew of activity, from observing rooftops to having certain cameras to unusual behavior. And while all of those are legit claims, for violent extremism for organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and terrorist, which our government adamantly refuses to title it as such, let's call that particular homegrown extreme as what it is. But time and time again, we have known that this is not the case. We also know, which makes me question, why are they putting this out right now in 2016? We've had similar bulletins like this issued many times in the past, and here we are coming up again. Do they foresee some kind of violence after the election, especially if they steal it for Hillary Clinton, which we all know will have to happen in order to get her elected? Again, what do they see happening that maybe you and I don't? Now, here is another report that was put up, this one October of 2016. This is a strategic implementation plan for empowering local partners to prevent violent extremism in the United States. Now, what is the purpose of this document? Well, after the first bulletin was issued in August of 2016, this one came out August, September, October, just a few months later. And what does it detail? Well, it details working with local agencies in order to have a, quote, type of tattletale system on any people who they deem as possible suspects. On page 3 of the report, under Promoting American Ideals, it states successful efforts to counter violent extremism are in large part predicted on trust. Trust among members of families or peer groups, trust within a community, trust among the government, law enforcement, and the communities they serve. In the past, some have expressed fear of stigmatization and general distrust regarding CVE. Now, CVE stands for Countering Violent Extremism Efforts, specifically citing community engagement as being a carrier out for purposes of law enforcement investigations or intelligence collection. And while they go on to claim that intelligence collection is not what their goal is, or not their purpose, or law enforcement investigations, and they deny it tongue, tooth, and nail, that is exactly what we're seeing on a daily basis with the fusion centers, the NSA, with Snowden coming out telling us all about these government programs that are attacking us on the daily basis. And yet again, here is another, quote, strategic plan to work with organizations in your community to tell on certain activities. And quite frankly, this sounds very similar to things that have happened in tyrannical dictator countries abroad. For example, in Germany, I know I use this example a lot, but it's a good one to use. We had people tattletelling on each other because they thought, well, we're worried that there might be a Jew, or my neighbor's hiding a Jew, because they were absolutely scared of whatever lie that the government had perpetrated at that time. We have that kind of thing. Same things happen in Soviet Union. My neighbor, well, he's a political activist, and you know what? He might have that political schizophrenia that you've been parading on the television there. So you might want to check out my neighbor for suspicious activity. But the report goes on page 5, and it says, countering violent extremism efforts will be informed by a rigorous, evidence-based approach to research and analyze that address all forms of violent extremism. Partners will include researchers, analysts, and program implementers inside and outside of the government, not just in. Page 7 goes on to detail how community outreach and engagement programs can enhance trust between government and communities, as well as foster the cooperation and partnerships to advance a range of local interests. Down a little bit further, under engagement, it states, violent extremist narratism espouse a rigid division of us and them that often promotes an individual exclusion and isolations from his or her own community and broader society, and encourages a hostile relationship with government and other defined groups. Public discourse can also sometimes reinforce the us versus them narrative. While I do see the motive of what they may be attempting to say there, I think it's a very thin line. We have a lot of people that talk about the globalists, the Illuminati, the people working from behind the scenes who are out to get rid of our sovereignty and freedoms. Well, when we're talking about that, those people shouldn't be pulling strings from behind the scenes and directing our government. So that is somewhat of a very thin line to be drawn. Now, page 11 of the report details something very disturbing. It states in task 3.1, it says, studies indicate that family members, friends, or close acquaintances are the most likely to observe activities or behaviors suggesting an individual is being radicalized or has a violent intent. Using the latest research, the CVE task force will coordinate the development and dissemination of resources describing possible warning signs, as well as steps families and friends can take if they believe someone close to them is becoming recruited or radicalized to violence. The resources will include information for trusted members of local communities. All those families and friends may call upon for guidance or assistance. Now, here's my take on that. If you're not labeling certain extremism as, ISIS or radical Islamic, but it's just an open door for whoever it is, and then we also have such things as the right-wing extremist document, then what exactly are friends looking for in other friends and families looking for in other family members that just might be suspicious? What kind of activity can be reported to their daddy government to tattletale on those certain things? Now, let me get something clear. There are things, obviously, that need to be reported. If somebody has a backpack and, wires hanging out or whatever, and they're in a certain area and it looks like they're doing something, bad, and they've got bombs or whatever, for crying out loud, call someone. But everybody and most people have enough common sense to do that. And, to know, hey, look, there's somebody outside in my front yard that shouldn't be there and he's burying something in the yard. Let's call someone. Hello. This is things, that should be addressed. But when we're drawing a very thin line, it's kind of one of those things that can almost incite fear of, I don't know if my neighbor is safe. I don't know if my own mom and dad are safe or my children are safe. And so we have this increased, intense amount of fear in family members against family members. And that's just not what it's about. I think there's a right way to do things and go about things, but I also think you have to be really careful. So this is something that is ringing alarm bells for me for that reason, in that manner. But it also goes on to detail something that's also nerve-wracking for me. And that is, it says local intervention teams need to be created, and they play a very critical role in assessing the needs of individuals who can become radicalized to violent extremism. But it goes on a little further to state that these teams can be led. That means led, they're the leaders, they're in charge, by a variety of practitioners, including but not limited to behavioral and mental health professionals. That's your counselor. You're supposed to be a confidential conversation. Well, now it's public and can be used against them. Local law enforcement officials and faith-based and other non-governmental representatives. So we have them working in lieu with our churches. Now, we already know that some pastors and things have been hired by the government via FEMA to act in the event of, well, whatever kind of thing comes up. I know pastors who personally have been asked to, if they need to, go door to door and ask their members to give up their gun rights in the event of some kind of disaster. I don't know about you, but if there is a disaster, there's probably going to be a lot of bad people out and about. And you might have to protect yourself. But yet the bad guys are still going to have the guns. That's a fact of life. History shows it. But nonetheless, what drives this to the brink is the fact that churches, not all, but some, are getting rolled into the process. Now, keep in mind, this was put out October 2016, the last one, August 2016, both back to back. First, the Bulletin stating the problem. Second, the solution to the problem, how to find faith-based and other partners within the community so we can get an overall image of what's going on. And then the next thing, you're going to have they already have call-in lines to report this activity and growing the government all the more. But it's interesting that this is just in time for the election. What things do they know that we don't? Now, here's one more eerie report from Fox News that puts Christians under the radar and further proves my point. Now, there was the state of Georgia, a pastor there who was told to turn over his sermons. According to the report, Dr. Erich Walsh, Attorney General Samuel Olens wrote to attorneys representing the pastor. He said that he was told to please produce a copy of your sermon notes and or transcripts. Well, to be frank, no organization has the right to request such activity from a pastor, but yet that is what's being done. And if the pastor chooses to give it up, well, now they have that information. What do they need it for? We already know that via 501c3s, they have to turn in their member list. How many people go to the church? These kinds of things are already turned into the government, and chances are, obviously, names of members as well. This is where we are literally crossing a line. When we are surveillance to the brim like this, that spells trouble. But I can't help but ask the question, what's underway? Do they foresee a revolution? Do they foresee an uprising? Do they foresee a civil war coming up? Why the need to increase such things and bring more awareness to these things right around election time? I can't help but address the question, why? We are living in very dangerous times. Now, let me just make a quick disclaimer. I think we need government. We absolutely must have government in order to run as an organization. What I don't like is corrupt government ruling things from behind the scenes. We have good government right now battling bad government. Then we have globalists playing and pulling on the strings of the two government bodies that fight against each other, with the globalists trying to take charge of the whole enchilada. This is our system. That's the truth. That's what's going down. I've done lots of reports on this, but when you have one at the top who's pulling all the strings of like people like Hillary Clinton, we know that that's what George Soros has been doing. That's been proven in the facts, in the email evidence, and WikiLeaks is releasing more bombshells. I know 2 bombshells came out about Donna Brazile leaking, the questions early now, 2 questions to Hillary Clinton before the election. But yet, hey, none of that exists. So let's just look behind some closed wall. Oh, look, bird, let's look at the bird, or squirrel, as the cartoon says. But nonetheless, there's an agenda. There's somebody pulling the strings, and we cannot allow that to happen. We must allow the good government to rise up and to get out there and do the right thing. So please make your voices heard on election day. Not only that, but keep an eye out, folks, because look, these bulletins, there are good and bad to them. Please know that. There's good things in these bulletins, but it also comes with a little bit of poop in the pie. One of my favorite sayings, evidently, but there's always bad mixed in, and there's problems. And when I know history and seeing what happened in history, this is eerily similar to some of the things that were pushed around during Hitler's day, pushed around during Stalin's day, during Mao's time. So when I think about all these things, I can't help but see parallels, and I can't help but ask the question. Now, there is ways, to do it right, and there is ways to do it wrong. Obviously, we need a level of protection in America against homegrown extremism, but Christians and patriots and people with nationalistic views shouldn't be lumped into that, because we don't have a violent bone in our body. I would never endorse violence. I myself am a very laid back person, but nonetheless, that's my disclaimer there. And we wouldn't act out in violence, and nor should anyone. That's not the kind of people we are. And we stand against corruption. We stand on our constitutional rights, and there I'll sit. I don't want no globalist freak pulling the strings from behind the scenes, and nor do you. Anyhow, thanks again for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You want to follow all the news updates that I do. I do Bible prophecy, news, conspiracy, everything. Check it out. Also, please make sure you're stored with food. We're about to hit some bumpy times in the economy and the election. The Lord only knows what's going to come of the election on November 8th when we get close to those results and hearing those results and what's going down. You need to be prepared, especially if Hillary Clinton gets in office. We're in a lot of trouble, folks, because she's going to go after YouTubers like me who are just sharing news and truth just because of a political stance on one issue that she doesn't approve. So make sure you're prepped and ready to go with food. Also, check out my other sponsor at getthetea.com. He's got a brand new product there, Ali C, with flu and things that are on the rise and all the attacks on our health. Ali C helps keep me clear from getting sick, and it's been a pretty good product so far. I absolutely love it. So check out Ali C. And one last thing, make sure you go to deceptioninthedesert.com. I will be speaking there. So hopefully I'll get a chance to meet you guys November 4th, 5th, and 6th in Las Vegas, Nevada. Buy your tickets. They are almost sold out. Thanks again for tuning in. This is Lisa Haven signing out.